So our first speaker tonight will in fact be John Harbison. Let me just give you a little bit about John's background if you don't already know. He's been a resident of Palos Verdes since 1991. He's been active as an advocate of parkland since about 2013. He recently successfully won a case to force the PVHA and the city of PVE to reverse the illegal sale of 1.7 acres of parkland. He has also been active in ROBE, Residents for Open Board Elections, which was formed in 2015 to press for democratic reforms in the PVHA election process. A founding member of PVrrg, he is thankful for the opportunity to improve awareness of issues facing our community and potential solutions. He earned his MBA from Harvard, as a master's in accounting, a CPA, and 40 years of business experience as a management consultant, an executive at Raytheon, a CEO, and an active investor and board member in early stage companies. So would you please join me in welcoming John to be the first speaker.
Thank you, Michael. Good evening, everybody. For those of you in the back of the room, there are some seats up front here if you want to sit down. So if you get tired and want to come down now or later, please do that. So I'm really glad everyone came tonight. As Michael said, what we're trying to do is to share information. For PVrrg, when we saw a lot of the discourses going on, there was a lot of confusion out there. And a lot of statements, and some of them backed with facts, some weren't backed with facts. So what we thought, perhaps a role that was a little different than what was out there, was to just try to sift through all that, go back to the sources of the statements behind the facts, and put together for your consideration what we found was factual answers to a series of about 30 questions that we have heard answered either by ourselves or by others in the community in various forums. So we put that all on a website page. You'll see a link to that at the end of this presentation. All of these slides are on the website. You can download the PDF of the show. There's actually a little video if you want to watch it again in 5 minutes instead of 20 minutes. And also there's links to, on the page, to the source documents and to other information that we found that might be helpful, including some of the websites from some of the groups that are taking that point of view. So what we're trying to do is we're presenting information for your consideration. We're not taking opinion on this, and that's sort of the ground rules. There may be other websites. The 4 websites that we have found that are out there are 3 that are advocating for the measure. First, the city's website has quite a bit of information that you should look at in terms of their question and answer page. If you go to the website version, you can click on these links and go to all these source materials. There are 2 for 2 pro groups, the Save PE Police.org and the Keep PE Police PD.org. And then there's one website that is against the measure called bluffcode.org. And there's a link here to their specific page on Measure E. We can't vouch for the statements in the 4 websites above. We can vouch for the statements we found in our website. We try to be very transparent. We have links on there. If anyone finds things that are on our website that they believe are inaccurate, we would like to hear about it and investigate it, and if we've got something wrong, we'll change it. And in fact, at the bottom of the page, you'll see some changes that we've made based on things we've learned since we first put the website up. So we're trying to do this in a spirit of full transparency. There are other sources which you can find on our website if you want to learn firsthand from our city council members, our city manager, and various source documents that tell you about what is our police department. There is, in back of March of this year, shortly after the Measure D failed, there was a presentation by each of the department heads on what each department did, and Chief Kepley had a presentation there on the police department, so that presentation can be accessible on this link. In September 26th of last year, there was a consultant that was hired called Lewis McCurry. Mr. McCurry was the consultant that did this. He gave a presentation, and the presentation on that and the recommendations are shown in that second link. At that same meeting, the police department union representative, Steve Barber, indicated that the POE, which stands for Police Officers Association, is firmly opposed to any recommendations that involve police staff being cut. And the city manager also rejected the McCurry recommendations, although subsequently there was a meeting on the 30th of October where there were discussions of recommendations and a follow-up discussion. So those staff reports were there. Out of those follow-up discussions, there was approximately $630,000 of savings that was identified, although the decision was made not to implement any of those immediately, that they would be implemented potentially over time in terms of through attrition. So anyway, the source documents, if you want to hear that, and the links to the website, you can actually see the videos as well. So what is this measure and what is it going to cost us if we do this? So the first sentence really summarizes what it is. So it's $342 if you have a 0 square foot house. If you have any square feet in your house, it's 20 cents for each additional square foot. So you can do the math. If you have 5,000 square foot, that would be an extra $1,000, so it would be $1,342. When you calculate it, you read what's in the ballot measure, some people are confused by the phrasing that all accessible buildings and structures on the land, and they thought, well, that's just the improvements. It says improvements, but all it is improving from the point when there was nothing on your land. So it's all the structures on your land. And the estimate is that should generate about $5 million a year, and the length of the measure is 3 years.
9.
Or 9 years, no, sorry. So the history of the tax, there have been stuff on social media, it's not a new tax, it is a new tax. I think both are right. So what it is we've had a parcel tax for decades now. It was originally called a fire tax, and that was about $4 or $5 million. And that was up for renewal in Measure D. That failed to pass. It needed 2/3 and a little under 60% voted yes for that. So since then, we haven't had a tax. So those people who say this is a new tax are saying we don't have a tax now. If we do this, we have a new tax. And those who are saying it's an old tax are viewing it that, well, this is the same tax we've had for much of the last 30 years. So that just to clarify, if you hear both of those statements, they're usually by advocates that are emphasizing one half of the thing, but again, for information, we want to be clear what is there. In terms of the size of it, the overall police budget, you'll see different numbers from 7.1 million to 7.5 million. And the reason for that is over time, that number has changed in the last year. It started out in May when the budgets were being set at 7.5. During the year, there were some things that were changed that were one-time changes, not structural changes. There are links on the website where you can hear the city management talk about that. So in terms of the structural thing here, we've used the number of 7.5 because that's sort of structurally what we have before any changes are made to it. But there's another slice which we'll get into, which is the unfunded pensions piece of the pie. And so the 7.5 is what is in the annual budget that we pay every year. Essentially, it's a cash expenditure that we're paying. Most of that is for payroll, but there are some other costs. And then the unfunded pensions is, I'll get into this a little bit later, but at any point in time, we have a certain amount of money that's in the fund in CalPERS, which we contribute to, that earns certain amounts of return and grows hopefully over time. And every year they do an actuarial assumption of who's going to retire in what years and what discount rate to come back, and they compare what we're going to have to pay in the future for all that and compare it to what we have today, and the difference is in unfunded liability. And what CalPERS does is they pass that along to the cities that are participating. So if we're always earning the 8%, 7.5% and 8% that is projected, that unfunded liability might be zero. If they don't earn it, then they come back to the cities and they say, you are now responsible for paying that. And you can pay us now, or if you don't pay us, you have an automatic debt. It's like a mortgage, you got 30 years to pay it back. So that's a real debt that we have to pay. It's possible that will go up over time. It's very unlikely it will go down over time, but I'll get into that a little bit more. So that's just explain when you see different numbers, sometimes you'll hear 10, sometimes you'll hear 7.5 or 7.1 million. That's really what those are talking about.
John, 10
So the budget itself, we try to normalize for special things like if Rancho Palos Verdes adds 2 patrol cars, we take that increment and we adjust for that, for instance, or if Rolling Hills does an adjustment. And if you look at the 3 other cities on the peninsula have grown a little bit under 3% in terms of the amount the sheriff's department is paying them for their fees. And then the average of what we've actually paid is about 6% over the last 4 years. In terms of the amount we're paying compared to the others, if you make it on an equivalent basis, and the website actually calculates this every year by home and by citizen and by acre, but this is looking at it on a home basis. That $7.5 million turns out to $1,300 a home. If you add in that pension from 2017, it gets up to about $1,800. If you look at the sheriff's quote at $3.5 billion, that would be 600 and some. And then the numbers on the right are the amounts per home in the other cities. And on the one on the right, which is Rolling Hills, we've added in the costs they have every year in terms of their gates, as they spend about $1 million on the gates. Because obviously if you have all the gates locked down and people walking in, you don't need patrol cars going around. So we thought to get closer to an apples and apples. So all of those charts have pension in it, with the exception of the one on the left. But just to point out, we don't have an option to do this without a pension. But that's just for instance. So can we constrain the growths? Obviously, one of the arguments is, that we can control the growth of our own police department better than we can with the sheriff's. In theory, that's true. But as I said before, the growth in the past hasn't shown that we've done that. In the spring of 2017, there was a cost reduction request, and the police department came back with only $21,000 in potential savings on that $6 million budget. And then there was $800,000 of savings in the Mercury report, all of which was rejected at the time. So our ability to control it hasn't been shown. There's been stuff said out there of what about this LA sheriff proposal? Well, it's the first stage. There needs to be somewhat stage to refine it all. This is taken from a request for information of the city manager, so it's provided by the city. It was prepared by the city to summarize the quote. There were 2 situations there. All this is on the website. You can read at your convenience. The first was a scenario that was essentially 12% more patrol than what we have now, which is 2 cars out all the time, and that was $3.5 million. And then the second one was 4.3, which was later updated to 4.5, which was for 50% more. So that would be 3 patrol cars all the time patrolling versus the 2 that are patrolling today. There's a third patrol car that's available at the center that can be deployed by the watch commander. But a lot of the time that person's back in there and not roaming around. So sometimes you'll hear it's 2 to 3, that's why. There were 2 points on this that were important to kind of address some of the things that have been said out there. The first is the last point there is said that the Lomita station will shift peninsula deployment to PVrrg, acting as a force multiplier for the city. So obviously we need to clarify all that, but that seems to, when we looked at that, conclude that there at least some portion of the Lomita sheriff, obviously not the whole Lomita sheriff department, would be moving in and out of here, and as the cars moving out, that would increase the amount of presence that we have. The next steps in doing this process, if we choose to explore the sheriff, is there's a sheriff feasibility study. It takes a few months. It basically says, is it practical? Since we're contingent with other cities on the Hill that are using the sheriff department, that's very different. If we were just out in the middle of nowhere, that might be a not feasible option. So the feasibility aside, and subsequently we can tailor to our needs. So the sheriff is sort of like a menu. If you say, I want to have 6 squad dogs all the time, or I don't need 3, I can only do 1, or I want to have an extra detective, you can decide what you want, and they will give you a price for that, and they will change it over time if you decide you have too much or too little. In terms of our overall spending level, you can see the police cost for PVE per capita. This is by person, I guess, instead of by home. This slice here is police, and it's hard to tell, there's a line there, yellow. The fire doesn't show up in the other columns because it's a little different mechanism. When Prop 13 passed, we had our own fire department. We got money from Prop 13 to pay for the fire department. We subsequently outsourced that to the county. The others were already using the county. So the county just keeps 5% to pay for that, and they give us that equivalent of that 5%, and that covers about two-thirds of our budget. Another way to look at this is if you take those costs per resident and per home and per acre, you said if we got the same pricing that the other ones had, it would be about $2 million. Now, we should find out what the density of their patrol cars are, and if we want to have greater density for more responsiveness, we may choose to have a higher number. But that's what, if we have the same presence that they have in those other places, those are what we should have. So when we looked at the bids of 3.5 or 4.5, we're either getting more patrol than they're getting, or we have some negotiation ability to bring that down, we would think. I mentioned before that line there suggests that Malago Cove Station would still remain here as some sort of a hub. There would be a lieutenant based here, and some police officers from our police department we would expect to be hired by the LASD. That's what they typically do, just as when we outsourced our fire department, they started working for county. And that transition of the fire department in the 80s went pretty smoothly, and my understanding is all the personnel were absorbed. This force multiplier, if you just think about a map of where those policemen who are going to go serve Rancho Palos Verdes or Rolling Hills, if they go back to Malaga Cove, there's to be some additional police cars that are available if there's a call, which is an extra benefit of having a base there. I would not expect that they would close Lomita and move it there, but if I take what the request was, it's there. There's also been a lot of talk about, well, the sheriff doesn't do a lot of the things that we do in Palos Verdes. That's part of what you get in this feasibility study. I went to their websites, and these are things on their websites. You can follow links, but these are things that we say we're doing in PVE, and those are things that RPV is doing with LASD. And you can see a lot of the things are in there, and if there is something that's missing, we should factor that into the equation when we compare the costs of that. So I know that David is going to talk a little about the pension, so I'm not going to get deeply into this, but we use CalPERS, which is for California city employees. They assume investments are going to earn 7.5%. The problem is that in the last 10 years, they've averaged 4.5%. So that's why we've got this unfunded liability. So since 2015, that's up to $14 million that we have to pay back that we didn't have before 2015. And about 10.8 going back relates to our police department. That will continue for the past service of those police. If we source to the LA Sheriff, we would just be responsible for the pensions up till then, and if the underperformed, we may have additional payments there. What drives that unfunded library is, one, the returns don't meet the expectations. Secondly, they change the discount rate periodically. And every time they move it down, it means that future payment sounds bigger now, so there's a bigger unfunded. And they just announced a reduction. And the third is the payback time of whether you pay it back over 30 or 20. It's like a mortgage. You have a 30-year mortgage, you pay a smaller payment than a 20-year mortgage. And they have announced that they're moving from 30 to 20. So those last two things are known changes. So we'd expect to continue to see that in the future. And the top one depends on what happens in the stock market and how they perform. This is how CalPERS performs versus the La Sierra, which is the LA County Employee Fund. They've done a little bit better in performance. over time, but they haven't been spectacular either. Overall, CalPERS is 32% unfunded and La Sierra is 20% unfunded. But what's important about contracting with the sheriff is if in the future they didn't fund enough from those past liabilities, they can't come back and charge us then. If their costs in the future go up, obviously they can pass those along. Just to keep the moving along, there's been discussions about what our financial position is. There was a post last week saying that, from a senator saying that we were in the top 100 of California cities in terms of financial stability. That's looking at where we are in 2017, but you can see the trend has not been great. It's gone from 28 to 9 since 2010. And if you compare us to our sister cities, they're also in the top 100, and they're ranked higher than us. We're 91, 64 for RPD, and 22 for Rolling Hills. And if you look at that trend overall, ours has been going down, which is the chart you saw before, and Rolling Hills is actually trending up, and RPD is fairly flat. So our situation is somewhat deteriorating. There's a lot of discussion about response time. We've been able to pull, it's in there. There's some concern about response time, whether they're really measured apples and apples. We requested last year that the city do their feasibility study and then really try to equalize that so everyone's measuring the same thing. Geography is another factor in the crime thing. We're blessed here that all the peninsula cities have limited access points. We're all a long way from freeways, and we all have windy roads and a few street lights and street signs, so it's hard for bad people to find their way around our communities. However, there are some unique characteristics in our communities. Rolling Hills obviously is gated, has limited access. Rolling Hills Estates has some higher crime because they have extensive retail. PVE has 5 access points and a border on the Pacific Ocean, and RPV obviously is bordered but has more access points. So if you factor those things in, the website has these reports. You can select whatever report you want to support whatever your point of view. Some say we're doing better than the other cities. Some say we're doing worse. Some say the trends are going down. Some say the trends are going up. I would say the overall conclusion is all of the cities in Palos Verdes are really quite exceptional in terms of crime. And some of that's because of our geography, and some of that's because we're blessed to be served by a good police force, whether that happens to be the PD or the LA Sheriff. Some people have expressed concern about continuity of the officers. I think there's generally a lot of very positive feeling towards our officers. And there's some history there. I mentioned the fire department did this once before, and there was a smooth transition then. I've talked to sergeants and members of the LASD to confirm what their plans are. They hire many of those employed. They actually put that in their intent within their bids. They have the same philosophy in the other communities for community policemen. So you've heard stuff out there saying, oh, well, they're just going to randomly put different officers every week here. That's not the way they do it. They have the same people in RPD and the same people in RH. And clearly they could be transferred out if they choose to be transferred out, but that happens not that frequently. And then finally, there is another aspect of this is that transfer, if we decide we don't like a police officer, we have more flexibility if we're the LASD for them to reassign them somewhere else than if they have to stay within a unionized situation here at PVrrg. One of the questions that comes up, it's an easy one to answer. I've read about corruption in the LAPD. Why do we want to be part of that? Well, the answer is LAPD is a totally separate organization. LAPD is like Palos Verdes Estates, an independent thing serving Los Angeles. And LASD serves a whole bunch of different things. You can see the left chart shows these are the places LASD serves, and on the right is a blow-up of the sheriff stations in Lomita. People say we don't want Lomita's problems, but as you can see, Lomita is less than 10% of all of the deployment from Lomita. It's mostly a peninsula deployment. And then that's kind of the summary. So we look forward to any questions that you might have. There's the link to all these issues there. If you don't have to write the thing down, you just go to PVrrg.org. On the front page, look for Measure E, and you'll find it. Thank you.